Good morning and welcome to the February installment of our Breakfast Briefing series. As I mentioned a minute ago, I'm Andy from the team at Seismic and I'm our Chief Community Officer. Seismic is a impact and sustainability consultancy, a group of experts who are on a mission to help businesses prosper by becoming increasingly impactful and influential forces for good in the world. Next slide, please, Krista. Thank you. So our team at Seismic brings together a number of areas of expertise under the broad umbrella of ESG, or impact and sustainability. We help our clients develop credible, robust ESG and sustainability strategies. And we've built out some really deep expertise in areas and with frameworks like B Corp and net zero. And we help our clients communicate their impact in the world in an authentic and credible way. And that's one of the main topic I'm going to be speaking about today. The team at Seismic has had the great fortune of helping well over 100 organizations and brands of different sectors, sizes, areas in the world, number of them up here. And we're going to have the great fortune of hearing today from a couple of our guests, our clients from GrowUp Farms and Lily's Kitchen. And what we'd like to cover today, we're going to hear from our colleague, Seismic's Head of Sustainability Communications, Olivia Hill, on some best practices around impact reports and share some examples of some really strong impact reports. Olivia is then going to lead a conversation with our two guest speakers, who are Sam Crossley, who's Marketing Director at Lily's Kitchen, and Gillon Dobie, who's Impact Director at GrowUp Farms. After that, we're going to open it up the floor for a bit of Q&A and hopefully a bit of group discussion, shared learning points, and then we'll wrap up at about 9:30 UK, 10:30 Europe time. So with that, I would like to hand it over to introduce Olivia Hill, who heads up Sustainability Communication Services at Seismic and helps our clients communicate their impact, their commitments, their progress towards those commitments in an authentic and genuine way that creates real engagement with a variety of stakeholders and value for their brand. Olivia is a seasoned communications professional that's been helping brands engage their stakeholders and build brand equity for well over 20 years. I'll come back for the Q&A at the end, and over to you, Olivia.
Thank you, Andy. Lovely to see so many friends of Seismic here today. Thanks for joining us. What I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes doing is talking about impact reports and how to produce and create a great one, and what is best practice in industry to produce one. But before I do that, I just wanted to do a bit of scene setting for you, which will be quick, but to explain the landscape we're currently sitting in. The first point to mention is that there are a lot of different reporting frameworks out there, and depending on your industry, your business might be required to issue a report that adheres to specific frameworks. But for the purpose of this session, we're going to be focusing on impact reporting for B Corps. It's a holistic framework that covers all areas of impact and sets a high standard to aspire to. And what we're talking about today is high-level insights on impact reports with best practice advice from the B Corp community. The other thing I wanted to touch on was what we call this demand for transparency that is growing. It's coming from your investors, it's coming from consumers, and that means in both the consumers demanding it from the products that they buy and also the companies that they work for. They want companies to be transparent about their ESG. And we're also seeing more and more legislation appearing, asking businesses to disclose their impact and their ESG metrics. And that is only set to increase. It varies in different countries across Europe, But the takeaway from this is that ESG reporting is going to be mandatory. It's inevitable. So you can either wait and then have to panically gather your data when the time comes, or, as I would advise, you can get ahead of the curve. The final point, just in setting the scene, is what we call the rise of greenwashing and the risk of green hushing. So what we're seeing a lot of is companies afraid to talk about their impact. They fear the accusations of greenwashing, that they are not reporting on their impact correctly. And so that's given rise to this new term, green hushing, where nobody's saying anything at all. They're keeping it behind closed doors. And this is a dangerous place to be when there is this call for transparency, because that is the opposite of transparency. And I really feel that the way to get past this fear and this state of paralysis that people are getting into is to look to an impact report, because it is a really powerful way to communicate both your current and your intended impact to your stakeholders, to the people that your business depends on. And so let me tell you why that is. So if we go to the next slide, Krista. What I'm just going to talk to now is what I would say are the business benefits of producing an impact report. And first off, it's that transparency point. It's what will give you the scope and the space to hold your business accountable by publishing your impact. And it also helps you to define what I call an ESG narrative. So sustainability is a complex subject. There is a lot to say, and people are, if they've done a lot and then need to publicly share it, actually putting it in an impact report helps you to distill that down and think about what is the narrative that your business wants to say around ESG. It also acts as an annual external benchmark. By publishing your metrics and reporting on your impact on an annual basis, you, and it's that accountability point, are forcing your company to think about what you want to share, and you're doing it annually so that you can look back on what you published previously and then see where you are year on year beyond that, which talks to the second last point about showing tangible progress for your business on the issues that are material to you. And that means what, the issues that your stakeholders care about is what you should be reporting on. And then that shares best practice across your industry for better business. And one of my biggest concerns around green hushing is that if nobody is talking about that impact, if no one is sharing what they do, how do others learn? How do we raise the bar of how business can be better if you're not publicly sharing it? And impact reporting allows you to do that. I wanted to just briefly touch on B Corp, which I mentioned before. If you are a certified B Corp, you are expected to publish an impact report. It's in the ELAB UK requirements in the years after you certify. But we find more and more clients who are on a journey to B Corp are actually publishing their impact reports earlier than that. They in doing the BIA, the B Impact Assessment, you are gathering data on your impact. You are gathering the evidence behind it to put into the BIA. And so actually having done all of that work, it's actually quite easy to then make the step to translate that into an impact report. So I wanted to just talk you through we produce a lot of impact reports. We have a library here of impact reports at Seismic. Every time one of our clients publishes one, but wider, every time we see one, we share it in the business and we discuss what makes it great, what would we do, and we're always learning, and I would really recommend that for anybody. But some of the things that we've pulled, some of the insights we've learned from that, seeing many reports, are, I would always say, less words. Try to keep it simple. You can end up writing a 100-page report that sadly not a lot of people will read. So really make the effort to distill down what is a complex subject, to tight. Again, that's part of then your sustainability messaging, and visualize it, bring it to life with imagery and infographics. Facts and figures are vital. They, you know, sustainability reporting is a lot about the numbers. So bring that data to life. And another way to bring it to life is to use case studies and quotes. Those are the real life examples of the initiatives that you do, the projects that you have delivered. Show those because they bring the personality to the numbers. I would really limit jargon. The world of sustainability is littered with acronyms and jargon, and a lot of people understand them. And it is your stakeholders that are reading them, not people who are versed in sustainability. So keep it simple. And then finally, we find unless the founder or the CEO or a senior member of your business at the beginning personalizes it and is the opportunity to state your ambition. What is your ambition for your business in impact? Where do you want it to be? And what are you proud of achieving now? So those are what I call the marketing must-haves. But as a sustainability advisory, there are elements that make not just a good impact report, but a great impact report. And these are around what you as a business need to be reporting on an annual basis. So share your metrics, but also share your future targets. So collect them annually, think about where you want them to be and share those. I would embrace the journey. Don't be afraid of saying, you know, we're not where we want to be now. We've got a long way to go, but we're working towards it. We have an intention. I think that's what's really important to share and evidence your impact. I talked about how the BIA asks for that evidence. It's a requirement when you submit to certify. So you've got all the evidence there. Share it, showcase it, and consider your stakeholders. We do something called a materiality assessment, where you are looking at your stakeholders and asking them what are the sustainability and social issues that are important to them. And that can actually form the basis of your impact report so that you are talking to the impact areas that you know your stakeholders care about. And finally, I would really validate your methodology. And that is where things like B Corp come to the fore, certifications that or partners or that verify the data that you're sharing. So I now just wanted to walk you through some of the impact reports that we've seen, some of the many that are in our library. And I would really encourage doing this, as it gives you real insight into what you like, what you don't in your business, what makes a great impact report. So the first I'm just going to share is Lily's Kitchen, and we are talking to Sam from Lily's shortly. I love their name, Paw Print for Progress. They have a lovely playful brand and they bring that to their impact report. You can see here an example of a look back in 2021 of what you did. And they look back on the year before, the year now, and the year ahead. So they were, you know, that accountability point comes to the fore here. The next one I wanted to share was our friends at X and Y. They are a sustainability workspace. We had our offices there with them for a while. This here is a timeline of their moments to celebrate in the last year. I think this is a really good snapshot right at the beginning of an impact report that just allows you to pick out in, you know, short, here you've got visuals, barely any words, of some of the things that you have done on your impact journey, and it allows you year on year to then build an ongoing timeline. The next impact report I'd encourage you to look at is Patagonia's. Patagonia is a very interesting example. They're a flagship sustainability brand. We're lucky enough to have worked with them on some amazing projects recently. Their impact report is very different in style to their brand identity. So they've created what I call a sustainability identity. It is very pared back. It has no lifestyle imagery of the clothes of their brand that you'd see on their website. They've chosen a much more corporate, much more simple, much more numbers, much more serious style for their impact reporting, which I think reflects how they feel about sustainability. So it's an interesting choice to do that. Another brand that also creates a sustainability identity is Unilever, a different look and feel. And I think that's worth considering. The next one is GrowUp Farms, another of our friends who's going to be joining us shortly. who recently produced their impact report. And I thought this was a lovely example where we were discussing with GrowUp how we showcase the fact that when they, the traditional supply chain of lettuce production from seed through to the consumer, in the way that they have transformed the industry and grow it, they've cut it almost in half. And so it's not even just a reduction of emissions at certain points, it's actually a complete rethinking of the entire process. And so we had to spend quite a bit of time thinking, how do we visualize, how do we show what was originally a supply chain process and what they've now been able to achieve? So think about those graphics, think about how you tell those complex stories in a simple visual. This one is Jude's next, who do a lovely job in their impact report of really visually bringing to life a lot of the quite serious numbers and stakeholder focuses that they do. So you've got here on the left, this is an example of a lot of their metrics. They've broken them all down into the areas that they are measuring, and they've featured them as flavors of their ice cream, but they are all clear numbers that they break out into their packaging, their waste, to show what they've achieved. And on the right here, you can see that this is a breakdown of their stakeholders, that they've thought about who are the individuals that they engage with as a brand, and then they subsequently talk through what are each of the impact areas that they are working on that are relevant to those stakeholders. And then I wanted to share with you Papa Herbs, who are have produced a number of impact reports now, and I love seeing theirs every year it comes out. They have a wonderful, playful brand. They really bring to life is a lot of numbers. They measure a lot of things, which is phenomenal. And then they have the job of breaking that down and making those numbers manageable to absorb and take in. So this is their highlights page on the right. I'd always recommend a highlights at the beginning of an impact report, just to flag the numbers of what you're doing. And then final one, I could go on forever, but I just will pause on Seismic's own impact report. And we are working on our the next impact report for 2022 at the moment. I've included just the example here on the right that talks about B Corp, because I thought it was really helpful to just think about if you are a certified B Corp and you have the insight that the BIA and the scoring gave you, feature that in your impact report and feature the breakdown. So we showed our score, we explained what that means to people who aren't B Corps, and then we showed the breakdown of what it is. And then what we also did was set a target for the score that we want to reach when we recertify in 3 years' time. And by publishing that target, we are immediately, even though we published this within a month of becoming a B Corp, we are holding ourselves to account for 3 years down the line of where we want to be and how we want to improve. So I'll just finish before I bring in Sam and Gillon on what I would say are the 4 things, if you're going to take anything away from today to bring into your impact report. These are the 4 things I would do. The first is map out your structure. Really think about what the flow of your impact report is going to look like. And I would base that structure on something to do with your ESG approach. So a lot of companies have developed an ESG strategy. They will have pillars. Use those to break down the structure of your impact report. Another route that a lot of people do is to follow the route of the BIA, so B Corp's 5 impact areas, to talk to each of those points. Or you might follow your materiality assessment and do it by stakeholders. But the point is to choose a structure, think about how you report on your impact, and then that's something you'd want to follow year on year so that you can showcase this ongoing journey. The second thing I do is create a dashboard of your metrics. This doesn't need to be a beautiful thing. I've seen amazing ones, and then I've seen standard Excel spreadsheets. The point is to work out what you want to measure, note it, and then draw those measurement numbers in on a regular basis. It's just quarterly, so that you're not forced at the end of the year to gather them all again. And what that dashboard will do is hold you to account. It will show you the metrics measuring what your impact is. And then year on year, you can compare. You can look at where you've improved, where you've dropped. So you need to change your approach, and where you've reached and improved and surpassed the targets that you have. The third thing I'd say is undertake a peer review. We just did a very light one day, going through some impact reports, look at others, use our library, and take a look at people in your industry and what they are doing, because I think that really helps you to pick and choose what you like and what you don't, and how you want your impact report to feel. And then my final point is think about external validation. If you are publishing an impact report, you are trying to be transparent, you are holding yourself to account. And what better way to do that is if someone has externally verified the numbers that you're sharing. And so that might be through B Corp, it might be through a partner like us at Seismic, it might be through an audit, but something that checks that dashboard, that methodology, and verifies and showcases that you are doing what you say you do. So enough of my voice. I'm going to bring in now some two of our friends from Seismic. Sam, who is marketing director at Lily's Kitchen. Lily's are a founding member of the B Corp community here in the UK. They certified back in 2015 and they're now on their third round of certification. So they have produced a number of impact reports, and Sam can bring hopefully some insights to us today of learnings through that journey. And then Gillon, who is impact director at GrowUp Farms. They grow lettuce. They're transforming the salad industry, as I mentioned, with the impact report they've recently produced, as they have an approach that prioritizes sustainability. And GrowUp certified as a B Corp last year, actually in the same month that they produced their impact report. So they produced the impact report earlier than they needed to, and Sam's here to tell us why. So let's bring them up on screen. And I've got some questions for Sam and Gillon. So welcome and thank you very much for joining us. I don't think we yet have Sam on screen. Lovely. Hello. Thank you both. Lovely to have you here. I've got some questions I'm going to run you through. And then what we'll do, everybody, is just open the questions out to the floor. So if you've got questions for us all, do let us know in the chat here, and we'll start to monitor those while I'm just taking Gillon and Sam through some questions that I have first. First, I'd just like you both to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your company, about your impact journey, and why you produce an impact report. So Sam, let's come to you first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So a little bit about Lily's Kitchen, if you're not familiar with us. We're a natural pet food brand that's always had purpose at its heart. We were set up by a lady called Henrietta Morrison after her dog, Lily, became quite ill and eventually stopped eating entirely, which once Henrietta started cooking homemade food for her, she realised was quite linked to kind of the ingredients that Lily was struggling with in mainstream pet food. And since then, we've been a leading force in what proper food for dogs and cats means and how we can have a positive impact on pets' health. So pets' health has always been at our heart. But Henrietta and the team identified early on, this didn't just revolve around nutrition, but also the planet that pets enjoy so much and the people who love them. So I guess you could say being a force for good has always been in our DNA, way before Lily's or the UK had even heard about the B Corp movement. So when the B Corp movement came to the UK, as Olivia said in 2015, it was a bit of a no-brainer for Lily's to get involved. We were one of the founding members of the B Corp movement in the UK, and I believe the first ever B Corp certified pet food brand. So for us, from our impact kind of reporting journey, in the early days of kind of, producing an impact report and explaining what we were doing as a brand, no one really knew in the UK from a consumer perspective what a B Corp was yet. So our impact report was vital in summarising kind of everything we did that made us a B Corp. Whereas that journey's kind of changed and what B Corp means and why it was so important and why it was such a great external validation for the great stuff we were doing. Whereas now stakeholders are much more familiar with brands tracking their impact. So it's now an excellent opportunity for us to take stock as a business and review how we're doing in achieving our impact goals and what we can do better, ensuring we're setting that continuous improvement targets for us as we continue to grow. So it's been a really interesting kind of shift in journey and how we've reported and what the impact report itself has meant to us as a business.
Interesting. Thank you, Sam. I'm going to pass on to Gillon to just introduce himself and grow up.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Is it? I'm sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Good morning. I'm the impact director at GrowUp Farms. We grow fantastic tasting salads that last longer in your fridge, and we've been doing that for about 10 years now. And we have been growing with the highest possible environmental and social impact that we can. We became a B Corp in November with a score of 105, which was great. We were really pleased with that, and we weren't actually expecting it, but we got it, and that was absolutely a massive delight. And in terms of our impact journey, I mean, I come from a sort of heavy industry and manufacturing background. I didn't, you know, I wasn't a salad person. I was involved with energy, building, looking at steel manufacture, you know, making paper, all sorts of things like that. And making tires, that was one as well I was involved with, is that these large, heavy industry businesses are really, really good at measuring their environmental performance because they aren't sustainable businesses, and they have to show to their stakeholders how they are improving. And as a result, they're very, very transparent, and B, they're very, very good at having their numbers fact checked and correct, because they know that they're going to be scrutinized way, way, way more than perhaps a sustainable food brand would typically be, although that's, I think, changing. So, I mean, our impact journey was trying to bring that level of scrutiny and fact checking and absolute precise, correct numbers to what was originally, I mean, quite a lot of Kool-Aid. Is certainly in the vertical farming industry, a lot of Kool-Aid being drunk, not many numbers being checked, and trying to bring that, to change that for our business so that we absolutely know where we are, and we're sort of punching with the large manufacturing businesses in terms of how we go about measuring our impact. And we produced an impact report because you've got to show, just in the way like finance, and if you need to show your numbers, you need to show that you're making money for your stakeholders, otherwise they won't invest in you or they won't buy stuff from you. And it's the same with impact. You've got to have numbers to show that you are making a positive environmental and social performance, not least for a B Corp, because most B Corps are benefit corporations. We have an obligation to all stakeholders to improve the world and improve society. So it's in our articles of association, and you need to demonstrate to that to stakeholders on an annual basis. So we very much treat it as I sit in the finance team, not in the marketing team, because we see it as a function of our reporting as a corporate function, and as a result, it means that we add a very high level of scrutiny. So the impact report is the culmination of all of that, I guess. Yeah.
Really interesting. Thank you, Gillon. Thank you to both of you for giving a bit of context to where you are in your journey, what your businesses do, and how you have found reporting. I do agree that I think financial reporting and non-financial reporting should both be one and the same. They are equally as important. And I believe that we're really not far away from it being mandatory, and it's how every business will approach it, whether or not you're a B Corp. So let's talk about your impact reports. Sam, I'm just going to come to you first. As one of the first ever, as you said, UK B Corps, you produce a lot of impact reports now. What are the learnings that you've had over the years? How have you improved them? If you think back to the first you published versus your more recent one, can you share some insights from that journey?
Yeah, sure. I think what's interesting for us is as we've been on the whole journey of the B Corp movement growing in the UK, I think it's been absolutely amazing for us, because it means you've got such a much wider community, and the B Corp community really is a community. You really can speak to other brands, share with other brands, learn from other brands. And I think that's what we've done over our journey, is what kind of when we first started and were first writing an impact report, it's probably a bit basic, to be honest. It was very much, you know, the world in the ESG and in kind of what impact means has shifted so much since 2015. Everyone on this call will be aware of kind of it's such an evolving part of the puzzle when it comes to business that I think, you know, when we started out, it was pretty basic. It was, I think we took it from exactly your kind of advice, Olivia, of this is what the BIA structures us to be scored on. So this is what we're going to track on. And what I think we've developed over the years is a confidence in our own passion for these areas. That point about the materiality assessment and understanding what's important to our stakeholders. And I think as a brand, we've developed so much into creating our own passions and our own goals and our own targets, rather than just being about the BIA and you know, making sure we've got the right points and so on. So we focus, as we've grown, on demonstrating how we're improving our B Corp score, like you said, and really demonstrating what it is we do in the business that feeds into that. We focused more on, I guess I'm a marketer, so I hate this phrase, but less fluff, and more kind of that factual elements of this is what we're genuinely achieving. And I think we've got a bit better at putting our hands up and saying, actually, this is where we're not doing so great. So actually, we need to work on these areas, and that's what we're going to say. You know, we say, you showed in the example you showed up on screen, Olivia, we always say, we said we'd do this last year, and this is what we have done. Now, obviously, I'm a marketeer. I like to put a little, make sure it all sounds extremely positive. But we, you know, so it goes against the grain sometimes for me to go, well, what are we actually failing at? What aren't we doing a good job of? Let's be honest. And I think we've got better at that over the year, being honest with ourselves. And that comes, I think it's a confidence, like I said, that we've developed over the years of understanding our role in this space and understanding we don't have to be perfect. We have to be honest, and we have to be trying. And I think that's what the beauty of the B Corp movement really growing for us in the UK has given us, is that more confidence, more ability to learn from other brands who are putting their hands up and saying, oh, we're doing this, but we're not doing so great at this. And that allows you to feel in a safe space to be able to be open and transparent with all your stakeholders and say, what can we do better? And like, let's learn and let's keep trying. We're trying our hardest. I think that's really important. So yeah, I think that's how we've improved over the years, but still lots to learn. I love seeing these examples you're showing today, because it's got me thinking we're in the process at the moment of writing our next impact report. So it's got me, I'm like taking all of your notes from the chat, Andy, that you posted about, you know, best practice and so on, to reshare with the team, because I think it's dangerous. You can fall into a bit of a rut and be like, we know how to do this, we're just going to do our impact report like we did last year. And actually there's so much, we'll just build on that. There's so much more we could be doing. So it's really exciting.
Thank you, Sam. I completely agree. It's the journey, and it's also like getting past the mindset of I must share all the things that I'm brilliant at, rather than seeing that this is an annual repetition. So it's got, you know, you want room for improvement, don't you? You want to show how you've progressed, and you want to be brave in doing that, and not feel that this needs to just be a showcase of your everything you're great at, but also an honest, open sharing of what you're not. And they're equally important. And you know, they're what avoid the greenwashing, and you're doing it in a space where that's expected. Gillon, I'm going to come to you now with your first impact report that you published at the same time as certifying as a B Corp. We're working with you on it, and for those that haven't yet submitted or in that verification phase, you don't know always when you're going to certify. So it wasn't that they were both going to be appearing at the same time, but ended up doing so. And I just wanted to know if you can share the process of that BIA, which was still very fresh for you. How did that influence what you were sharing in your impact report?
Yeah, it's a long road to get to B Corp. Took us two years, probably more. Thinking about it for 6 months to a year, and then actually doing it took almost 2 years. But on that journey, what you learn is very quickly, actually, and then you have to kind of scrabble to figure it out, is this B Corp's attitude to a proof, not promises approach. You can't talk about things in the future. Everything has to be in the past. So actually, because it took so long, was actually quite good for us, because we ended up with a higher score, because we were implementing things that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do had we not had to wait for ages before B Corp certified us. So in the round, it was actually quite good. In terms, well, I mean, and then why did we pick B Corp in the first place? Well, because it scores you, you know, not very many certification. I mean, there's so many different ways of wrapping this up now, you know, but very few of them are a global, and B, score, right? That has a number that you can point at and say, look, that's our score. Very few certification bodies. I mean, if you look at a lot of the financial ones like the SASB, you know, they don't score you. They don't say that you're better or worse than someone else, or that you're showing improvement over time. They just, you are or you aren't being sort of monitoring or measuring your impact. Likewise, ISO 14001, you know, there's not a good or a bad one, there just is or there isn't. So that's why we picked B Corp in the first place. In terms of impact report, why did we end up doing it at the same time? I don't think there was any particular strategy to do it. Circumstances led us to push ourselves off the diving board that we were standing on the edge of for quite a long time, which was sort of, you know, I've been working for 2 years on the numbers, getting all our numbers right. You know, we really, really wanted to make sure, I wanted to make sure that every fact that we had was a real fact, and that it wasn't just, forgive me, Sam, marketing, something great that we could say, that it was a real number that we could sit behind. And, you know, if you stood up in front of a judge, you would be able to say, yes, I believe this fact is a fact, which was quite difficult with our team, because they wanted to shout and say wonderful things about us. I said, no, we're not ready yet. You know, it's one of the reasons why we haven't published a net zero strategy, is because we've got to get it right. We don't want to make claims that we can't make. We want to make absolutely sure that we're correct on this. And then the message. So having the numbers, you know, I had a spreadsheet that was pretty dry and boring. And then my colleagues were producing loads of content about what we wanted to say, and they weren't aligned. And we knew it was going to be complicated to kind of bring it together. And circumstances basically made it such that we had to get pushed off the diving board, speak to Olivia, who then basically knocked all our heads together and made our impact report, bring those numbers and that message together into something that's really great. But it was a fun week, lots of late nights and late night pizzas, I think, were had trying to get it to together, but because we only had a couple of weeks to get it done. So
it does take more time than you think.
It does take more time, but the 99%,
one of the questions we had in the chat.
Yeah, 99% of the work though was getting all the numbers correct. You know, if you've got your numbers, then it's much easier to be able to say things. Then and actually it's a 6-page report, but actually that what went into it was probably 2 or 3 years of work in the end. Yeah. And
also I think the BIA again does half the work for you, because in getting the score, in gathering the evidence, you've already got the content there to then translate. The task is actually distilling it down.
Absolutely. The BIA definitely helps, because it sets a standard that you need to meet. It's always very difficult to try and meet your own standard. What is that? You know, what's good? What is material to society and the environment? Well, it's very difficult as a business to know that without doing a hell of a lot of work. What the BIA does is it sets that standard for you. So if you're meeting it, you feel like, okay, well, that's pretty good. I got X number of points for that. And someone else has worked out how many points it's worth and how material it is.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
So you can feel confident sharing it. So let me ask you both about stakeholders. I think a lot of people publish an impact report, and they're hopefully thinking about the stakeholders when they're preparing it. But what have the reactions been that you've had from your stakeholders? Who's actually read it? Where do you see the value in what you've produced? Sam, I'm going to come to you first.
Sure. I think for us, where I get the most response or feedback about the impact report is actually employees or prospective, I should say, employees. So we use our impact report as an opportunity to really celebrate our achievements internally, as much as externally. We're structured in a way that where we, until May of this year, we're recruiting our first team member who actually focuses on impact. We're recruiting a head of impact and sustainability. Up until this point, as a business, everything to do with B Corp, everything to do with our ESG strategy is sat genuinely across the business. So what goes into our impact report is genuinely everybody's work. The role of writing it sits with marketing, because we look after our in-house studio team, so it's natural we write the briefs and make sure it looks nice, but the content is coming from everybody's work across the business. And so it's so important to us that we're getting all of that down, and actually in the process of getting it down and then reading the final result, we're finding that you've forgotten all of this great stuff you do as a business. It just rolls into everyone's day-to-day life, and we've got our head down on like various putting fires out, or big to-do lists. And it's so lovely for the team to be able to sit down, read that impact report, and realize how their role is played into such an important part of how we are a business and how we are a force for good as a business. So employees certainly, they love it, and it really celebrates what we do and brings us back together into this joint purpose, which is so important for us within our business. But secondly, perspective, whenever I'm interviewing, whenever we've done a huge recruitment drive over the last few years, I've had so many interviews, so many kind of prospective chats with candidates and talent, and they all mention us being a B Corp. They all mention having read the impact report, and that's all. And the first thing I ask is, why would you want to work at Lily's Kitchen? It always comes back to that, how excited they are by what we're doing in this area and how much it means to them, how they want to work for a business that meets those values that are so important to them. And that's just so fantastic and so exciting to see how engaged people are with what we're doing, and how much it attracts that talent that we need, that's ultimately going to grow our business. So I think those are my kind of key areas I see.
I find that too. I'll be interviewing people and they will say, I've read your impact report. I'm like, great. And then I'll get question on it. They'll pull questions out like they've interrogated it, and we need to know the answers. I mean, luckily I wrote it, so I'm able to answer. But it does show that actually people are scrutinizing it, and that pride factor for your business. Don't underestimate the value that has for the employees that work for you, that they want to work for a business to be proud of, and to be able to see that evidenced in an impact report that you're prepared to publish is vital. Gillon, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, so I mean, we sorry, what was the question? It's about when
it's about stakeholders.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I remember now. So when we became a B Corp in November, it coincided with what I would describe as a period of intense retailer communication. We were talking to a lot of our primary customers and supermarkets, and they come from a position, I think we described it yesterday, didn't we, as sort of risk mitigation, I would say, with most of their incumbent suppliers. Particularly incumbent farming, the issues that typically supermarkets are concerned with are things like pesticide use, seasonal labor, and greenhouse gas emissions, and various other things. But the kind of questions they ask you are kind of questions that are really that are really aligned with what they would expect from a bigger, a sort of incumbent farm. And of course, what we're doing is, I mean, just for example, on seasonal labor, we don't have any seasons in our farms. We don't have any seasonal labor. We employ all our employees directly, and we are a living wage employer. But to jump through the various hoops that a retailer requires on that, it's very difficult, because they just have a tick boxing system of saying, how do you perform in this area? How do you perform in that area? So when we decided to do our impact report at the same time as, I mean, it was coincidental, but we said, right, we just got to get this done. And then it was great because then we could send it to all the retailers, or the ones that we were talking to at the time. And then they could see that we were fundamentally totally different to most of the other people that were also tendering or whatever. So it was great. And that was probably the reason why we did it in the first place. But also it just showed the power of this document, that you can put it in front of people and they go, oh, right, okay, I get it now. So we can use it for, you know, fundraising. We can use it internally with employees who, I mean, some of our employees didn't even realize some of the numbers that we were measuring. And they were like, oh, right, that's great. And others, it's the reason why they work with us. So they really want to know these numbers. And I get questioned on them, you know, on a weekly basis sometimes. So it's a great piece of work. It works across, I mean, again, if we go back to the point about, you know, if you're a benefit corporation, you have an obligation to improve the world and society to all stakeholders. Therefore, your impact report should be relevant to all stakeholders, whether they be your direct customers or your employees or your investors or whoever it might be. So, yeah, it's a really good piece of work, a good document that you can use across all stakeholders in different ways. I would say that our impact report, we will, what our goal is at GrowUp eventually is that our impact report will form part of our financial reporting as one document, because they shouldn't really be separate. They should be the same thing, because that's the business performance. And so we're hoping that we will be producing a much bigger piece of work at the end of this year, or maybe the following year, depending on how well we actually get on with it this year, which will be combined as one piece, one document, more like a multinational really than a sort of small business.
So then I'm going to pause you because I love hearing it, and I want to make sure that people on the chat get to ask their questions, because we have 10 more minutes of time. So I'm going to pause my questions. We'll open it up to the floor. There's a lot of questions in the chat, and I'm going to hand it back to Andy to filter some out so that we can try and answer them in the few minutes we have left.